Good morning. I promised not to take Lisa's sermon.
That's okay to do, brother.
Mine's probably longer. I've titled this thing The Other Day, and you'll hear why real soon. The other day I met a man, and he had a lasting impact on my life. And I've been wanting to tell the story ever since, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. Not until the other day when Dave Lewis told his story in front of the church. Before I tell you about this man I met the other day, I need to go back a bit, something like 11,000 days. I did the math. So the other day, about 30 years ago, I met a beautiful young girl named Leslie Flynn, and she had a major impact on my life. We fell in love, completed a couple of university degrees, and were eventually married. Shortly after our wedding, she began working here as your minister of music. The other day, I met a man named Mike Landreth, and he had a lasting impact on my life. He changed the way I view what Christians were and what they could be. Before Mike, I had absolutely no intention of ever joining a church community. After I met Mike, I did, and I joined. The other day, I met a young woman named Lisa Smith, and she had a lasting impact on my life. She invited me to go with her to Mexico and build houses for people I didn't even know. On that trip, I learned what it was to be a missionary, and I quickly became addicted. The other day, I met a woman named Helen Harwell, and she had a lasting impact on my life. Through this church, she was able to realize her life's ambition and do missionary work in Africa. I learned a great deal from her stories and the Kenyan representatives who were able to visit our church. The other day, I met a young man named Bobby Moon. I had met him as a boy named Bobby Moon. But he was a Mexico Mission construction crew member with my wife. And through him, I learned of a group called the Illumination Foundation and their work helping homeless families in Anaheim. They don't know Bobby Moon. They know Dr. Robert Moon. They had no idea who I was talking about when I talked about Bobby. I volunteered for Illumination Foundation and was hooked, and the Bergers have been volunteering for them for years. We finally reached the other day that I was talking about. The other day, I was providing popcorn at an Illumination Foundation carnival. And at that carnival event, we helped to raise over $30,000 for homeless families with school-aged children in Anaheim. There, I was introduced to the mayor of Anaheim. We shook hands, exchanged some small talk, and I missed an opportunity to tell him that I knew the real mayor of Anaheim, Alan Smith. I've talked about this with Lisa, and she says she assures me he would have laughed too because he knows Alan Smith and knows that Alan is the real mayor of Anaheim. He seemed like a nice guy, but the funny thing is, he's not my mayor, and I don't even know his name. In short, he's not the guy that I met the other day that had that lasting impact on my life. And the funny thing is, the guy that I did meet, I also don't know his name. While I met a lot of people at that carnival, there was this one guy that stood out. He was different. First of all, he was likely the blackest man I had ever met. He shone. With very short, snow-white hair. He was as thin as a rake, and he moved through the crowd in the carnival like he was dancing to his own music. Wherever he walked, the other people avoided him. To me, he looked like a boat moving through a sea of humanity, and he was leaving a wake. I left my booth, walked up to this clearly homeless and quite possibly crazy man, and handed him a bag of popcorn. He smiled at me. And through Illumination Foundation, I've learned to recognize that smile. It's the smile that homeless people give you when they realize that you can see them, that they are no longer invisible to you. He started to talk to me, and honestly, I could only understand a few words because of his heavy accent. I did a lot of smiling, and I nodded, and I chimed in with a comment every so often when I thought I understood his meaning. He smiled again and raised the popcorn, and in thanks he said, "God is good," and he began to walk away. And I replied, "All the time." He froze, and then he turned around, and this time his smile on his face was that of a homesick man returning to his family. He said tentatively, "All the time?" And I replied, "God is good." The other day, you see, I had learned this traditional greeting from our Kenyan missionaries. And I had just responded in kind to this man in Anaheim. We spent another few minutes in animated conversation, and these are the only bits that I remember. Ever since he was a little boy in Liberia, he had dreamed of coming to the United States. I don't know how he got here, nor at what age, but he had been walking all over this country for a very, very long time. He was now an old man, and he was walking through Anaheim, intent on seeing Disneyland from the outside. He thought he might walk to Hollywood next. He led me to believe that America had lived up to his childhood dreams. If he were still in Liberia, he would be wandering around there too, with less to eat, and the soldiers there might still be shooting at him for target practice. The last I saw of this man, he was walking away from the carnival towards Harbor Boulevard, and I have thought about him often. Today I mentioned a few people I have met that have had a lasting impact on my life. I limited it to a few of the ones that led up to my meeting my Liberian brother, but there are so many more. Each meeting is a blessing. You are each blessings. I'd love it if you would each think about how many people you have met, and then try to imagine all the people who have actually met you. The other day, a friend and neighbor of mine died, and his widow asked me to do the funeral. Me? I didn't grow up in a church family. The other neighbors at the funeral heard me speak, and some of them asked me to do their wedding. These people had no church home. I was able to do for them what Mike Landreth had done for me. The other day, some 2,000 years ago, a few people met the Son of God face to face, and he had a major impact on their lives. Some of these people became Christians, and in turn, they had major impacts on other people's lives, who in turn continued the pattern. And you're all here today because the sequence continues still. Sunday, November 30th, is the first Sunday of Advent season, where we once again prepare to meet the Son of God, and then likely eat too much and exchange gifts. The other day, I met a man from Liberia. I don't know his name. I gave him a bag of popcorn, a smile, and some of my time. And he gave me another perspective on life. God is good all the time. All the time. Thank you for listening.